Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really important topic, post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
Indeed. A complex subject.
Yeah, and you, our listener, send in some fascinating material. So our mission really is to dig into that, pull out the key insights, maybe find some surprising angles.
Without getting lost in, overly technical stuff.
Exactly. Keep it clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get started. What exactly is PTSD, based on what we've seen?
Well, fundamentally, it's described as a set of symptoms, often quite distressing ones, that can pop up after someone goes through or even just witnesses a really traumatic event.
Right, so we're talking intrusive thoughts, feelings, behaviors, stuff that just won't go away easily.
Precisely. And the key thing the sources point out is the pattern. When these reactions aren't just fleeting, but they stick around and form a clear, persistent pattern.
That's when doctors can step in, diagnose it, and hopefully treat it.
That's the idea. It differentiates it from, say, the very normal acute stress reaction most people would have immediately after something scary happens.
Okay. And it seems like experiencing potentially traumatic events isn't actually that rare.
No, not at all. One figure that jumped out from the material was that something like 60% of people might experience a frightening, even life-threatening event.
60%? Wow, that's more than half the population.
It is. But, and this is crucial, experiencing trauma doesn't automatically mean you'll develop PTSD.
Right, that was another key point.
Yeah,
Just because you go through something awful doesn't guarantee PTSD.
exactly. Which brings us to the why. Why do some people develop it and others don't after similar events?
Yeah, what factors into that? The sources seem to touch on a few things. The nature of the trauma itself, how severe it was, that obviously plays a role.
Absolutely. The intensity, the duration, the type of trauma, those are big factors.
And then there were hints about individual factors, although maybe not spelled out in huge detail in these particular pieces.
True. Things like previous experiences, coping mechanisms, maybe even some biological predispositions, though the focus here seems more psychological.
And, reading between the lines, the focus on individual psychological disorders. It almost implies that social support, or maybe the lack of it, could be really significant too.
I think that's a very reasonable inference. Feeling isolated after a traumatic event, not having that network, it's widely understood to make recovery much harder. Lack of support can definitely amplify the negative impact.
Right. Okay. So trauma's common, PTSD isn't inevitable, and factors like the event, the individual, and support systems matter. Let's get into the symptoms themselves. The visuals broke them down neatly into 4 clusters. First up, intrusion.
Ah, yes, intrusion. This is where the trauma sort of forces its way back into the person's present experience.
Look, unwelcome guests. So we're
Yeah.
talking vivid memories popping up out of nowhere. Nightmares.
Exactly. Distressing memories, recurrent nightmares about the event or related themes. And flashbacks are a big one here, too.
Flashbacks, where it feels like you're right back there reliving it.
Yes, it can be that intense, feeling or even acting as if the traumatic event is happening all over again. It sounds incredibly disruptive.
It really does. Almost like the brain can't file it away as past.
That's a good way to put it. And triggers can be anything, a sight, a sound, a smell. Things you wouldn't even consciously connect, but the brain does. The amygdala often fires up these responses very quickly.
Wow. Okay, second cluster, avoidance.
Right. So if intrusion is the trauma forcing its way in, avoidance is the effort to keep it out.
Makes sense. Trying to steer clear of anything that reminds you of it.
Precisely. Avoiding distressing memories, thoughts, or feelings associated with the event, but also avoiding external reminders.
Like places, people, activities.
Yeah, all of the above. If a certain place or even talking to a certain person brings it all back, the person might go to great lengths to avoid them.
I can see how that could really shrink your world over time.
It absolutely can. It offers maybe short-term relief from the distress, but
Right.
long-term it reinforces the fear and limits life significantly.
Okay. Third category, negative alterations in cognition and mood. That sounds broad.
It is quite broad, but very significant. It covers shifts in how people think and feel after the trauma.
So things like developing really negative beliefs about yourself or the world.
Exactly. Persistent and often distorted beliefs like I'm bad, or no one can be trusted, or the world is completely dangerous. Blaming oneself or others inappropriately for the trauma is common here too.
Even when it clearly wasn't their fault.
Yes, that kind of self-blame or pervasive guilt or shame can be a really heavy burden.
And it also includes negative emotions, like constant fear or feeling numb.
Correct. Persistent negative emotional states, fear, horror, anger, guilt, shame, Also feeling detached or estranged from others, or, a really key one, markedly diminished interest in activities that used to be enjoyable.
Losing the ability to feel joy.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly isolating.
It really is an inability to experience positive emotions, happiness, satisfaction, loving feelings. It cuts people off.
Okay, and the final cluster, number 4.
That's hyperarousal, or more technically, marked alterations in arousal and reactivity associated with the trauma.
Hyperarousal. So
Right.
like being constantly on edge.
Pretty much. Think of it as the body's alarm system getting stuck in the on position.
So what does that look like? Being jumpy?
Yeah, exaggerated startle response is a classic one. Irritable behavior and angry outbursts, often with little provocation, problems with concentration, difficulty falling or staying asleep.
Sleep problems make sense if you're always vigilant.
Right. Hypervigilance, constantly scanning the environment for danger. And sometimes reckless or self-destructive behavior can fall under this category too.
It really sounds like the whole system, mind and body, is just stuck in survival mode.
That's a very apt description. Even long after the danger has passed, the nervous system is acting as if it's imminent.
So putting it all together, intrusion, avoidance, the negative thoughts and moods, the hyperarousal, you can really see how PTSD would just permeate every aspect of life.
Absolutely. Relationships, work or school, physical health, just general day-to-day functioning can all be profoundly affected.
And the sources emphasize it can be chronic,
Mm.
right? Long-lasting.
Yes, without effective treatment, these symptoms can persist for months, years, even decades, which is why recognizing it and seeking help is so critical. Did the sources give any sense of, say, how someone experiencing intrusion might actually describe it day to day?
Some accounts did, yeah. People describing feeling like they're walking through life with this internal movie playing on repeat, these sudden vivid images or sensations just hijacking their attention.
Mm-hmm.
Nightmares making them dread going to sleep, waking up, feeling exhausted and terrified all over again, just making it hard to feel safe or focus on the present.
That paints a very clear and difficult picture. It really underscores the debilitating nature.
Definitely. Now, treatment. We didn't dive super deep into specific PTSD therapies based on these exact clips, but the wider source material talks about therapies for psychological disorders generally.
Right, and the strong implication, which is accurate, is that PTSD is treatable. There are evidence-based approaches.
That feels like such an important message to land on, that even with these really difficult, persistent symptoms, there is hope. Getting professional help is key.
Absolutely vital. Effective treatments exist. They can help process the trauma, manage the symptoms, and really allow people to reclaim their lives. It's not something people have to just endure alone.
So wrapping up our deep dive for today, the picture of PTSD from these sources is complex but clear. It's a specific response to trauma with these distinct symptom clusters: intrusion, avoidance, negative changes in thinking and mood, and hyperarousal.
And these symptoms can seriously disrupt life. But crucially, while trauma itself is sadly common,
PTSD isn't guaranteed to follow.
exactly, and most importantly, help is available and effective.
Right. So for you, our listener, understanding this, the definition, prevalence, the symptoms, the treatability, hopefully provides a solid foundation.
Mm-hmm. For more understanding, more empathy, perhaps.
Definitely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Considering how common trauma is, like that 60% figure, and knowing the potential for this kind of lasting impact, what role do you think society, our collective understanding and support systems plays? How much could that broader awareness and support actually help mitigate the chances of events leading to PTSD in the first place?
That's a powerful question to reflect on, the interplay between individual experience and the surrounding social context.
Yeah, something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.